Hello, I'm Hans Clugston. I'm an attorney and I help folks answer their legal questions. I live in Prescott, Arizona mainly, but I'm also licensed in Alaska where we have a cabin outside of Homer. Not sure when I'll be able to get up there again, given the current state of affairs, but I certainly hope to. Um, you know, there isn't generally a legal answer to difficult situations, but thinking through the legal aspects of things can help you move forward. And what prompts today's little video is that I saw yesterday that a restaurant I've been going to for years and years, ever since we moved to the side of town we live in our little town of Prescott, has gone out of business. I thought they would have been able to survive, and maybe they're just shutting down to reopen and regroup later. But it's frightening when you see things like that of stable businesses, good businesses that are forced to shut down because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and kind of get a sinking feeling in your stomach. And you wish them well. I wish them well, and they're starting over, whatever their next steps are. Starting over, that's something that we tell ourselves as Americans that we started over. The Pilgrims came to the New World to start over. And Daniel Boone went west to Kentucky to start over, have elbow room. And lots of rugged individualists went west with the Western frontier. And then after we bought it from the Russians, went up to Alaska, where we still call it the last frontier. The rugged individualism and starting over, either because we have to, because things have gotten too difficult where we started out, or because we want to reinvent ourselves. If we're doing it voluntarily, it can be exciting and something we look forward to. If it's forced upon us, of course, it can be a lot more difficult. It gives you, again, that sinking feeling in your stomach, but it is your heritage. It is our heritage as Americans, with all the messy history that entails, of course. Uh, but of course, we've been here before, starting over. We've had hard times before, and lately I've been reading about bankruptcy, history of bankruptcy, and some of the newer developments of bankruptcy. And there's a quote from, let me get this. I was just looking at this earlier. This is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our great early writers, about the desperate conditions of 1837. He said, "Society has played out its last stake. It is checkmated. Young men have no hope. Adults stand like day laborers idle in the streets. None calleth us to labor. The present generation is bankrupt of principles and hope, as of property." That's from Debt's Dominion, A History of Bankruptcy Law in America by David Skeel Jr. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. It's tough. People are having hard times. The restaurants are just closed. Other businesses are going to close. And what do we do about that? Well, we know, as I mentioned, that we're all tied in together. COVID-19 has shown us that. There is no independent, rugged individualist for most of us. We're tied into other people purchasing and consuming and delivering and driving and working. And if there's a tremendous weakness in any part of that, then we suffer as well. Some more than others, of course. And the food lines for the food pantries are just extraordinary things to see. So what do we do when looking at these sorts of very difficult situations? Well, we don't know. But what I'd like to mention today is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy has a lot of negative connotations, of course, and our country argued about bankruptcy all throughout the 19th century through the 1800s. It was a recurrent debate nationally about how to handle bankruptcies. Should there be a voluntary bankruptcy? Should it only be an involuntary forced by your creditors? It was mainly aimed initially, at least, with individuals. We had bankruptcy laws, then we get rid of them. We had bankruptcy laws, then we get rid of them. They included corporations, but it wasn't really until you might even say the Depression era that individuals and corporations were kind of seen together in the bankruptcy context, though in the late 19th century railroads are very important with the expansion of the country. They had very difficult times, so they went into receivership. So there was sort of a individual bankruptcy and some corporate receiverships, and now that's kind of all handled under the bankruptcy code of how to do this. And one of the great advantages of bankruptcy is it provides an orderly way of determining how to get that fresh start for individuals. I mean, that's the great advantage of, say, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy for an individual, is that you get to keep your primary asset, which is your ability to earn money in the future, which is, as Americans, again, that's another myth that we tell ourselves, or maybe it's true. I don't mean to be derogatory by saying myth, that better days are going to come, or we will create better days for ourselves in the future. So that fresh start, bankruptcy allows that because it has an orderly way to deal with things, to address that pit in your stomach, that you can put one foot in front of the other. And it can do the same for businesses. Businesses can liquidate or they can reorganize. And it isn't so much to give the business a fresh start, but to help it find new ways to survive or to liquidate its assets. And if it just cannot function, if it cannot be competitive for whatever reason, then maybe bankruptcy can help an orderly disposition of that. So I know it's frightening to think about bankruptcy for yourself or for your small business, but it does provide a way forward. And there was something, it's called the Small Business Reorganization Act of 2019, which took effect in mid-February of this year. So there hasn't been a lot of widespread use of it or reported use of it. So we're not quite sure how that plays out. And it was even reformed a bit by the CARES Act, one of the Corona pieces of legislation. But what it was designed to do was to streamline the process of reorganization for small businesses so that they could find a way to move ahead and survive. And I just kind of want to point that out today, that as scary as it seems, our heritage in this country is starting over, hanging on or finding a way for a fresh start. And that quote from Emerson, I mean, we've been dealing with issues similar to this for a long, long time. And it looks like we're going to be dealing with these issues from Corona for a long time. I'm not I say that I'm not the greatest optimist. I think maybe you can see behind me is Clay's Angelus Novus, famous print of his famous painting, which was not the most perhaps optimistic. And then the Van Gogh's Potato Eaters, which my father, when I told him that we were getting a place in Alaska, I'm going to grow potatoes, he thought I should get that. Also a very difficult time in the late 19th century. In any case, I wish you well as you find a way to put one foot in front of another, to make a fresh start, or to hang on during this very difficult time. Thank you for listening.